All right, this is the Noir Hour, and I'm sitting here with Emilio and Patrick of OCCULTS. Guys, how y'all doing, man?
How's it
Hey.
going?
What's up? Well, like, once again, I'm so glad to have y'all on. You guys are incredible. The first song that I ever heard was, oh man, what was it? Um, what was it? Well, I was scrolling on Instagram and I saw the sponsored song that y'all had. I guess when it first came out, "Sacred Heart"
Oh
is what
yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
And dude, that thing stuck. That song stuck with me. I mean, it's like I'm jamming it all the time. But yeah, I've been playing y'all a lot on my radio, and I was like, well, let me reach out and see if y'all want to have a little chat. So
Thank you.
Yeah, we
glad that y'all
appreciate
are
it.
here. So what have you guys been up to, man? So you're in LA?
Yeah, we're LA based. We're both from St. Louis, Missouri originally.
Yeah.
We previously were in a band called Nothing Still for a long time.
Yeah, a long time.
And we that band kind of split up around 2011, and we've done a few sort of stints ever since. But a couple years ago, Emilio, we were actually doing another round of stuff with Nothing Still, and we were writing a new album, and we it ended up not really taking off, and Emilio had started writing some new stuff that and sent it over to me, and I was like, man, this is like the stuff that when we were 18, this is the stuff that we wanted to do,
Yeah.
and we weren't good enough. We weren't good enough, and we didn't have the technology or the money to do the things that we
Right.
wanted to do. We wanted to sound like The Cure. We wanted to sound like Depeche Mode. And all of a sudden, Emilio started writing these like really amazing instrumentals that every single song, I was like, that sounds like this, and that sounds like that. And we just were like, let's see where this goes, and that's sort of the origin of OCCULTS. And so the whole Sacred Heart EP was, you know, all the songs that we were just kind of like playing with, and seeing what stuck, and we were like, let's start putting them out one by one, and so maybe seeing where the audience is, because we are from a different generation than the type of artists that are out now, where it's like we still come from a world where like everything was uh, from groundwork, and like pounding the pavement and
Yeah.
flyering for shows and doing all the promotion yourself. And now uh, everything is so different in a very digital sense,
Yeah.
and exactly like what you're doing. Like 20 years ago, you might not be able to get a show on the radio, but now you can have your own radio show or your own podcast or whatever. And so we didn't know what we were dealing with, a genre of music that we'd always loved, but we hadn't really existed in,
Yeah.
because our previous band was more like the Killers.
Yeah.
And so we were like, let's just see what happens, and if nobody listens to it, it doesn't matter, because we're just making the music that we love to make. And
Right.
so we just started putting out songs a month at a time. And so that's how the Sacred Heart EP came about, was by dropping these singles one by one,
Yeah.
and just seeing if people were interested in them. And yeah, over the last year, we've been able to build up like a nice little following, and I think we came close to like 10,000 monthly listeners this year, which we hope to expand upon. But compared to what we came into this expecting, it's unbelievable. And
Yeah.
we also have no expectations, so we just work songs to death until that's our two things, is that have no expectations, but also put out things that are quality, because we
Right.
don't when we kind of looked back at our previous band, we were like, we don't want to. We had songs that were on albums that like we admittedly can't listen to, that were just like only half the album's good, and so we just went into this being like, we're gonna have no expectations, but also we're not gonna put out anything that we're not happy with, right. and so we've just kind of stuck to that, and when we put out a song, it's because we believe in it.
Yeah, well, I think you guys are all killer and no filler. Yeah, man, I got to be honest, I did a podcast the other day with my buddy, and he was asking me about, what's your favorite albums that have come out this year, and I couldn't, I lost it. I couldn't really think of my favorite albums that had come out this year, because I don't really keep up with but about a handful of bands, but that got me, when he asked me that and I choked on that answer, it really got me thinking about some of the stuff that's really come out that's stuck with me. And I've been thinking about this all day. I'm like, man, I've listened to that EP all day, and I'm like, man, this shit is so incredible. Listen, I'm serious, dude. I am a huge fan. The music and the lyrics and the feeling, it's like, it's so authentic, there's a lot of bands out there that are copy and paste.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it all the time, and it doesn't mean that they're bad. It's just like, I've heard this and I've been there, but there's something different about you guys. That music, it's got like a raw emotion. I don't know, it's different. I really feel it super heavy, and apparently a lot of other people do too.
Really appreciate that. It's it's a lot of kind of trial and error. I mean, a lot of times with our music is it starts with just a framework of, I might have some sort of, inspiration from, whatever random album that I happen to be listening to that day, or, whatever pops up on my Spotify playlist or something. And I tend to, I use music, I have a day job still, and
yeah.
That's my outlet is writing and playing. And what you can't see on the screen now is the rack of guitars next to me, and that's a lot of times how these things start, is just, I want to sit around and just kind of noodle around and want to play. And it's almost like a subconscious influence of where the writing comes from. Sacred Heart, like you mentioned, was just a piano part that I really liked. I was kind of messing around with some sounds that I had and didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. And, when I showed it to Patrick, it was just a very raw demo of it. And, he said, well, what if we kind of took this, kind of more of the outlaw vibe to it, or gave it like a kind of a twang to it.
Yeah.
And in the music, and
goth country.
Yeah, like a goth country. And that I think is really fun, because I think what's great about this project is that we get to experiment. We get to play with a lot of the sounds. I mean, I get to play with all of the noises that my pedal board can do, and what my plugins can do, and make these unique sounds. And making those types of like goth country sounds was probably the most fun I've ever had, and whenever it came to writing any of our songs, because I just got to experiment so much, where it's like, all right, well, I'm going to play a slide part here, or I want this really old style tremolo sound on this guitar, and make it feel like really like spaghetti western vibe to it. But then when the lyrics come around, Patrick and I, for writing for as long as we have together, it's a very collaborative effort, where it's kind of like writing, when you were writing in high school, where you were writing, your first draft, your second draft, and we're writing these ideas down, and then we're kicking them back and forth, and changing things and tweaking things here. And it all still comes into play with the, we just want to be satisfied with what we put out, no matter what the outcome is of it. this is music. I think an agreement that we've had for the longest time since we've been in bands together is that we want to do this until it's not fun anymore.
Right.
And it's still fun for us. So there's no reason for us to stop. No matter if we have 1 or 1 million fans, we just have fun doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, you said that your last band, it was kind of like not really y'all's scene, and maybe it was at one time, but it kind of really wasn't where your passion was.
Yeah. It was definitely it evolved out of something that like if we could have been doing OCCULTS when we were 18, we would have done OCCULTS.
Right.
But it was something that evolved out of necessity. So it was just and also because we're both from St. Louis, like St. Louis had a very certain type of scene in the 2000s, and so we had to adapt to that while also trying to do the thing that we were trying to do. So that's how it's not that we didn't like the type of music, it just was like it just evolved out of something different.
Yeah. I feel you. I mean, I'm kind of the same way, I grew up in bands playing thrash metal, and although I love playing that style, it's not really where my heart is at, know. And now the band I'm in now, it's like melodic, goth, slow, but it's slow and it's fast, but it's all melodic, and all the songs are 6-7 minutes long. And it just really, every song is kind of like a journey. I mean, when you play it live, when I'm on stage with them, it's like every song is I really feel at home in that music. Whereas I didn't really feel that way in the past, but it's not that I didn't enjoy it. I just didn't feel like that was where my home was, so totally. I get that.
Yeah. It's a tough thing, when, in St. Louis, what's a weird thing is that there's, especially around the time that we were around, I mean, primarily the big thing whenever we were, and I think even before we got together in our original band, I mean, the rap metal scene was a big scene, and it seemed like just the metal scene in general was what was picking up, and as our old band started to get bigger, the emo scene and the screamo scene was what was starting to get really big. And the thing was, I think with the old band was that it was always almost like a too little too late thing. We were always just behind the curve of what was starting to get popular in the mainstream. When the Killers started becoming big and Panic at the Disco started becoming big, bands that kind of were kind of similar to our old bands, were becoming big. We were just starting to gain a name for ourselves, and it just didn't feel right to kind of stay in that, because we're getting, we got older, and you can't just go and sing songs about high school girlfriends when you're in your late 20s.
Can't do it.
And it was just kind of time to move on, and I think that technology brought us so far. I mean, it was honestly, the pandemic was just starting to kick off, and we were kind of on our own thing, and I just felt like I wasn't really having a ton of outlet in the old band of being able to write my own stuff. We had another writer in the band, and he was a music factory.
Right.
So it was he would spit out a song every night. And, in the time that it would take me to craft and perfect something, he would have an album done.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to have an outlet of writing, and that's the great thing about what's come about. I mean, you think about whenever we started, I mean, you had very minimal options of, unless you had old drum machines and stuff like that to make your beats, you had no other choice. Like, that was it.
Right.
Now with technology, it's like I don't even have to have an amp. I don't have to have a real drum kit here to record drums. I don't have to, because of the way that we can write and the way that technology's moved along, we don't have to do anything the way that they used to be done, that we were raised learning.
I get it. I get it. I'm trying to get into recording, which is something I've never done. The lead singer, he does a lot of the rough tracking and stuff, and he can just lay it down quick, almost thoughtless. But yeah, the when you're writing songs, it's definitely best. I mean, quantity is not necessarily important if it's not quality.
No,
Sure.
that is so important. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and there are so many people that just think that way. Like, let's put out stuff. And
Yeah.
I like, right now, like our last single came out in June, and we've been writing, and we've got like, 4 songs pretty much lined up, but I would rather have those be as perfect as possible instead of just like, hey, we got to meet this quota.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
take the time, we'll promote the hell out of something like Crystal Coffins, and then,
Right.
and actually, I mean, we do have a track coming out on Monday that's on a compilation. Uh, but yeah, we would rather, put out stuff as long as it's quality, and not so much worry about, the numbers or the plays and all that stuff.
Right. Well, you see some bands and you hear some of the things that come out of them, and you're like, how did that pass inspection? Yeah. Just honestly, I mean,
Believe me, we talk about
yeah.
that.
I mean, if it,
There are some bands that will remain nameless that we're just like, what the fuck?
yeah, we won't name any names or do anything like that, but yeah, I get it. And people send me songs, are like, man, check this out, man, they finally got a new song out after so many years, and I'm like, this is shit, dude, this is terrible.
Yeah.
But hey, man, if you're a
And
bit, if you're,
it's funny because we've even surprised ourselves because we've gotten to breaking points on a couple songs where we're just like, look, I don't think it is going to get any much better than this.
yeah,
Let's just put it out and find out. And then like all of a sudden it's like our highest played song on Spotify.
what was one of those songs that you think?
Well, yeah, funny enough, I think Prayers was one of those songs where we were originally going to put out Prayers in November of last year.
Yeah, I think so.
And he and I were not seeing eye to eye on it. And so we had the track Neon Hideaway, we had it in our back pocket. And so we actually moved that up. And then we were like, let's push Prayers off to December so that way we can finish figuring out what's wrong with it. And we just, we got it in a good place, and then it was just sort of like, well, let's hope for the best. And it's become one of our most popular songs. And at the time,
I love it.
Thank you. Yeah,
when
it dropped, we were just like, oh shit! Like it was skyrocketing for us. It was skyrocketing in plays on Spotify that we were just like, okay, this is unbelievable, but it just would work out like that. And then Crystal Coffins was another one that we really took our time on. I mean, we probably worked on it for like 6 months, and by the time we put it out, I was really, really stoked. And now that has become like our highest played song on Spotify. So we do, I do think taking the time and being a pain in each other's ass really does pay off in some ways. But
yeah,
I just prefer that. Like, look, I like to be obsessed with my own band, and so if I can pick up a song and play it and just be like, fuck, love that, then it makes me happy, and then that's what this is all about, And if it makes other people happy, then I'm thrilled. But yeah, if it's something that I can walk away from and be like, okay, I'm really proud of that, no matter what the outcome is, then that's what it's all about for me.
Yeah. If you're not in love with it, how can you expect anyone else to give a shit?
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
Yeah. I ran into that same experience last week. We've got a show coming up, and we were practicing, and I think we're doing a short set, so we have long songs, so it's going to be about 6 or 7 songs. And by the end of the 5th song, man, me and the lead singer just looked at each other and were just like, damn. Because it sounds so good in the spot that we're in practicing. It's just everything hits and everything's on time. So I feel it, man. Like before I joined this band, I was a huge fan of it, and now that I'm in it, it's kind of reaching new levels, and it's exciting. I mean, but yeah, if you don't love it more than the guy standing beside you, then
Yeah.
kind of
I
tough.
mean, when you're doing this kind of writing and stuff, that's something you always have to take into consideration is, can I stand to listen to this song
Yes.
1,000 more times and play this song
right.
1,000 more times in front of people and not be tired of it?
Yeah.
And we've had that discussion too. I'm pretty sure that he's sent me demos and I'm like, I don't know, man. Like,
Yep.
So we have to figure it out. But I'm honest with him, and I prefer him to be honest with me instead of us blowing smoke up each other's asses.
Yeah.
And then putting out something that's subpar. But yeah, exactly what he said. It's like, if I feel like it's the kind of thing that I can listen to over and over and over again, like then I feel good about it.
Yeah. Well, man, and y'all's old band. See, I didn't really know much about y'all's old band. Did y'all have any big highlights? I mean, did y'all ever, play any big shows with any big names, or have any like really special experiences in that band in terms of meeting cool people or big shows that were really memorable to you?
Man.
Yeah, I mean, we did. We did. I think our biggest, kind of what Emilio tapped in on, was that like we were always sort of, I don't know what the phrase is it behind the eight ball, or
Yeah,
I don't know what it is. It's like we're always sort of like not in the right place at the right time. And but we were I mean, we definitely played a couple Warped Tours. I mean, sometimes I'm like, I can't even remember some of the bands that we played with, but
I think honestly one of my favorites. So there was a local band in St. Louis called Ludo that got some really big names, and they had a really big following, and
Right.
they played one of the big venues here. I mean, what's the pageant? What's the capacity on that?
Oh, I'm not sure.
1,500, 2,000,
Maybe,
something
yeah,
like
probably,
that.
yeah.
And they invited us to come and do their Christmas show with them. And honestly, I think that was one of the most fun times. It's hard for me, because I was primarily lead singer in the band, and I have this very weird thing that when I get on stage, my adrenaline kicks to a point where I almost kind of black out, and I don't really remember a lot of it other than like flashes of the set. But I just remember the vibe was so fun, and it was a Christmas setting, and it was sold out. So I mean, you're looking out to the sea of 1,500, 2,000 people,
Right.
and everybody's loving what's happening. I think that for me was probably one of my highlights. I think between that one and then actually one of our last show.
That show we played with Stabbing Westward, which was really amazing. And if that's the last show we ever do with that band, like it was one of my favorites. I thought that we were like, for being I don't know, for having not played together actively for almost 10 years, like it was just a very solid set, and then us interacting with the guys from Stabbing Westward was really rad. And
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that band.
Yeah, and they were super cool dudes. Funny enough, we were playing in a snowstorm, and so a lot of people made it out despite being in a snowstorm, and we got to play in front of a really big crowd for having not played for a couple years.
Was it Valentine's Day too?
It was like the day before Valentine's Day or the day after Valentine's Day. So it was a really crazy set of circumstances, but yeah, and then the other thing is that we were playing with a lot of bands of that time. I mean, probably one of our biggest influences that we ended up playing a lot of shows with was Kill Hannah, and we were like they were part of what kind of set us off on that path.
Right.
And then we eventually got to the point where we were able to do shows with them, and we did sort of like a mini tour with them at one point too, in 2006. And what was that other band's name?
Clear Static.
Clear Static, but then the other band, the one that actually got kind of big.
Which one?
Shit.
That we're on the tour?
We're doing this live, guys.
Shiny Toy Guns.
Shiny Toy Guns. I don't know if you remember them. They got kind of big for a second, but they were on the tour as well.
Yeah. Cool. Excuse me. Yeah, I was gonna ask, what have y'all been listening to lately?
Oh, he's
Man.
the guy.
Like I said, I did a podcast the other day, and my buddies asked me all these questions that nobody ever asked, and I'm like, oh shit, dude, what have I been listening to? It's a lot of the times I don't listen to anything. It's just every now and then I'll pop something on and listen to it for a week. It's just it's hard for me to ever answer that question. But what have y'all been listening to that kind of been in the rotation lately?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're very eclectic. We both love all music, and I tend to really sort of get in a rut, whereas you kind of discover more new music. But then when I do, I ping it off of him as well. But he kind of tends to know more of like the the news.
I think a lot of the reason for me is like a lot of times what I do is I go to the gym and I hit a daily mix or something on Spotify and discover a lot of new music that way. I mean, lately, Vision Video, Goth Dad on TikTok, Vision Video I listen to a lot lately. Twin Tribes, I really like, which I happen to be wearing their shirt right now, unfortunately. We did just Twin Tribes and the band Wingtips. They actually just came through town not too long ago. We got a chance to meet and hang out with them. Been fans of theirs. The weird thing is for me is that it's like if I'm not listening to like this dark kind of goth music, or if I'm listening to The Cure, or I'm a big fan of the Smiths, and for me, and this is totally a stereotypical thing for me to say, but I listen to a lot of like cumbia and a lot of Mexican music. I don't know what it is. I think it's a lot of my upbringing and what I was surrounded with as a kid. And so when I need that kind of mental break from the dark music per se, that's a lot of what I listen to. I think both of us lately have also been, we really like what Prayers is doing. If you haven't checked it,
the band Prayers. Yeah.
I've listened to a little bit of them.
Yeah. We actually just went to one of their filming locations for one of their videos the other day. It was kind of neat.
Yeah, Leah Farsayer works out at the gym with me, and I'm like, hey. I'm just.
I don't know. Actors has been known.
Yeah, I love Actors. Boy Harsher is another one that I really listen to a lot. And then other than that, like, I mean, we just always kind of go back to, like The Cure, Depeche Mode. We're also big Duran guys, but then we haven't worked Duran into occult music yet, but we kind of stayed at those things. We love.
I've been listening to. I even go back. I like listening to like the Chameleons. I really like. Which is odd because I didn't realize how much of like an influence they had on a lot of the other bands that we have listened to in the past. Bands like Interpol or Editors. Chameleons are a really, I feel like, an underrated band from the 80s. I feel like they kind of got on too late when a lot of the kind of more post-punk and new wave sounds were coming around. I don't know. For me, it's, I guess it really just depends on the day of what I'm listening to. And if my kids happen to be in the car, I mean, my kids, oddly enough, really like some of the goth music that I listen to. So I raised them right, I guess.
I've also been sort of dipping my toes back in the water of some of the shit that we listened to in the late 90s. So like we loved Dead Z and Orgy, obviously. Those are some of our big influences. So I've been kind of fucking with that stuff again recently.
I hear you. Yeah, I love Orgy too, man. Candy Ass is the best. It's just,
Oh yeah.
and I always say that's like the greatest album title ever because you can't say it without laughing. I can't. Maybe I'm immature. I don't know. It's hilarious to me. But but yeah, yeah, listening to the Smiths and listening to the Cure, kind of, I would say those are some of my favorite bands, kind of like him and stuff like that. And I really put those on pause. Those are the bands I kind of go back to escape from Headspace.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Kind of get back into those. I was gonna ask, the whole thing that set me into, I guess you would call the dark wave, or what you would say shoegaze style, is I was a huge fan of Aiden, and they were back in the emo days, and I know y'all probably heard of William
Oh
Control,
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
and he kind of did what y'all did in some degree, of where he moved on from his band that was kind of, I guess it had kind of run its course, and then he started doing the kind of dark wave type stuff. But he had a record label at one point, and there's a band called Black Blondes. Have you ever heard of them?
No.
I feel like they've come up on a playlist at some point or another.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was two. I think they're from Virginia. It was just two guys, and they were making some killer music. And I don't think they're around anymore. I've tried to get in touch. The lead singer, one of the guys, his name's Rob. I've tried to talk to him, but that's been years ago. But Black Blondes, they kind of have a vibe like y'all, and that's kind of what got me into really trying to discover. And I just came upon Occults, just scrolling. I'm like, man, like that's that sound, but it's perfect.
Oh.
So, and I was I was like pleasantly surprised as y'all kept dropping singles. I'm like, dude, this shit is just better and better and better. And that's not really something a lot of people can say. I mean,
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is, we've started to fall into our own sound now. I feel like if you listen to, the Sacred Heart EP was a lot of the sound development of
Yeah.
what we want to do.
Mhm.
When you compare a song like Little Joy as our first single, and then you start moving into some of our new singles, you really kind of see how that sound kind of developed. And it, of course, it's all influenced by what we're into at the time, what we're listening to at the time.
yeah,
One of the big things for me is, Johnny Marr from the Smiths, huge guitar influence for me. Um, that's, like you said, going back and kind of getting that break away from the other stuff.
right.
I like going back and listening to that stuff and getting inspiration for how he wrote and his guitar melodies, or Robert Smith and the way that he wrote melodies in The Cure for his guitar parts. And those are sounds that I always loved, and they really, really help influence in just kind of the direction of way things can go, and I think, like I said, if you go back and listen to some of the old stuff that we put out and just watching kind of how the sound developed
Yeah.
according to that, I think was just a lot of fun. And I think we're finally at a point where we're kind of happy with where we're at right now.
It's like we were sort of cherry picking the sounds that we wanted to experiment with, and our first single, Little Joy, we were like, okay, we're kind of going this post punk route, and then it just started to kind of, we knew we wanted to sort of do post punk meets shoegaze,
Right.
and so Little Joy, when you listen to it, is sort of cherry picked from like bands like Editors, and we wanted to sort of see where that was going to go, but then we had this sort of crazy idea. It was like, oh, you know what? I really love the song "Physical" by Dua Lipa.
I was
Let's
going to ask you about that.
shoegaze song. Oh yeah, I'll talk about that. And so we were like, let's do a shoegaze version of that, and then that was where the shift started to happen, because then we had actually had Neon Hideaway and Sacred Heart already kind of written, and then Emilio found this sort of like in between Little Joy and what we did on Physical and wrote Ghost Town. And I was like, this slaps. Like, we have to put this out. And so that became our third single. And I still go back to Ghost Town and go, this is the sound. So
Yeah.
And I love what we did on Sacred Heart, and I really want to write like a second Sacred Heart someday in the near future. And actually our new the new thing that we got coming out, we do sort of borrow some of the Sacred Heart elements in that. But what we realized with Ghost Town was that, like, there's something here. This is what we need to do. So once we put out Sacred Heart and Neon Hideaway, and we were doing prayers, we were like, okay, this is sort of the roadmap. So you could listen to Ghost Town, you can listen to prayers, and you can listen to Crystal Coffins, and they're all sort of complementary of one another.
Right.
And it's funny because you're talking about him, and you got all these hymn posters in your background, and I say that him is one of the most consistent bands ever, because you can pull a song from any hymn album and put them in a compilation, and they all match. And you could take Vil Vallo's solo work as well, and they, even though it's technically not him, it sounds exactly like a hymn song. And so I love the idea of consistent music, and so we're trying to try new things and experiment, but I do think that we've kind of gotten into this groove where it's like we sort of know what sounds we like, but we're still experimenting.
Yeah. And you're not pigeonholed either. Like when you listen to Neon Hideaway in the mix with the other songs, you're like, oh, well, I didn't expect that. It's a little bit different. So you really are not put in a box.
And Neon Hideaway is a song that, like, I've been telling him, that's like, there's a version of it that's acoustic. And we were trying to find how that song would work in an occult sort of way.
Right.
And so that's the version that we released. But, like, I could still see that being, like, there are 2 or 3 different versions, like a full band version of that song. I could see an acoustic version of it. Like, it's something that just is sort of, it transcends one sort of tone or one type of genre. I think it can be anything.
And oddly enough, with Neon Hideaway, I mean, when I sent Patrick the demo of that, it was just an electric guitar and my vocal. And that was actually what, he wanted to release. He liked, what that was doing with it. Because it kind of had that, dating ourselves here is like the Bush Glycerine type of feel.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Just this kind of rhythm guitar playing through, and just the vocals that just kind of speak for themselves. Oddly enough, I think that, if I'm thinking correctly, I think that's the only song we've written in a major key, which is why probably it sounds and why it sticks out so much from the other songs. But it was just one of these kind of weird moods that I was in, and wanted to kind of challenge myself to just sit down and with a guitar and write. Yeah. And I'm happy with the way that it came out, but yeah, I can definitely agree with Patrick that I would love to see, 8 versions of that song.
And despite, like, putting everything out on an EP, I like to think of Occult's music as being this type of thing where if you took a couple of songs, or you've got a couple different playlists or whatever, if you found us on a playlist, like, you might find a couple different versions of Occults that you go, I know, because I like a perfect example is like the band Actors, like, they've got the song Face Meets Glass. Doesn't sound like anything else they've got. And that was the first song I heard of theirs, and I was like, this is awesome. And then I went and I listened to their newest album, and I was like, there's like 4 or 5 bangers on this album that sound nothing like Face Meets Glass. But that was the song, that was the gateway song that got me in. So I like to think that it's like, and people have messaged us on Instagram and said, like, I love Neon Hideaway, and I'm like, man, thank you. because obviously there are a lot of people that, like, their gateway song is Prayers or Crystal Coffins that just came out. Like,
right.
So I like that there's maybe a couple different versions of how you discovered our music, and I hope to continue that.
I just discovered it by accident, just scrolling down, and I was like, man.
And you said you discovered it by Sacred Heart, which is a totally different type of thing that we were doing, and so I like that. And
Yeah.
But I want to talk about Physical. I want to answer whatever questions you have about Physical.
Oh, well, I got to admit, I'm not super up on pop music, but I was listening to it, and I was like, and I saw where it was a Dua Lipa cover, and I must admit I couldn't tell you one thing that she does, but just curious where that came from, and then
she does.
Really how it went down was I was driving to Las Vegas, and my fiance and I were listening to Dua Lipa's newest album, and this was very early on in him sending me demos, and Physical came on, and it's just I at that point I'd heard it dozens of times.
Yeah.
But when you're driving in the car and you're just looking at the open road in the desert, and you're just thinking, you're like, there's something about this. There's something sad about this song. It's very upbeat, right? And it's nuts because our version is slow and shoegazy. Yeah. But if you compare them back to back and hers kicks in, it's like double the time. And so you don't think about it in that sense, but I just kept going, there's something about this that I feel like could be a shoegaze song. And I kicked it over to him, and of course he was kind of like, we'll see, maybe, yeah. But then once he started fucking with it, it started coming to life. And I was like, this is it. Now, at the time when we put out Little Joy. And again, we're sort of thinking is like, we're going to put out music, and if anybody listens to it, if nobody listens to it, that's fine. If people do listen to it, that's great. But we were sort of, our mindset was like, we've got Physical, like we should just put that out as our second single, because maybe people might, maybe through the algorithm, people might find that, and then they'll find Little Joy, and that might sort of be their gateway into hearing Occults. But yeah, our whole thing was taking that very current, very popular song, and then making it into something that like what we want to listen to.
Right.
And I think you bring out, by doing the shoegazy side of it, you bring out the emotion in it, the sadness in it, and make it something. When you listen to them back to back, they're completely different songs.
And I think that when the idea came about, my main reason for even coming on board is, I always consider Dua Lipa my future ex-wife. My ex-wife after my wife, and then I go back and marry my wife. Because Dua Lipa would be way underimpressed with me. And, I come from a background of, I was an EDM producer for a while, got some songs that made Billboard charts and stuff like that.
He's humble. He had a #1 song on Billboard. He doesn't want to mention it, but he did.
But coming from that kind of background, dance music and stuff is always kind of stuck in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
And so I tend to still listen to a lot of the pop music that comes out, just to kind of see what the current state of music is. And even, of course, my kids keep me up on stuff too. So, it was really fun to go and explore all of the parts of that song. I happened to get really, really lucky, and I found all of the studio stems for the song.
Yeah.
And I just started picking apart pieces one by one and go, okay, well, what makes sense to be played by a bass? What makes sense to be played by a guitar? And then what stuff should be left to synths and sequences and stuff like that. And rewriting that main line on a guitar was really fun, because I really got to experiment with that Robert Smith guitar tone.
Yeah.
That, oddly enough, I played on a Johnny Marr Jaguar, but um, just being able to experiment with new sounds and do new things, I'm always up for that kind of, excuse me, that kind of challenge. Is that when we face covers, is what can I apply to what OCCULTS would do?
Right.
And make it different in the sense that it's far enough away from the original that you know it's different, but it's close enough that you know what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like with we did a version of Black Celebration, which was simply just because we love that song, and we'd always wanted to do it in some form. And I think that the way that Spotify and distribution and everything, like you now have the ability to get away with things that, like, when we were younger, we would never be able to write and record a cover song.
Right.
And so we were just like, hey, I've always wanted to do Black Celebration, but like do it more upbeat and heavy, kind of post-punky. And so same thing, whereas you take a very upbeat pop song and slow it down and make it shoegaze. With Black Celebration, we're like, let's take this very synth heavy sort of drony type of song and then make it faster, upbeat, and post-punky. And that was sort of the mindset with that. And
I think that it's really unique that it's really interesting that you mentioned that about the rights, like having the rights to do covers and things like that. I think that what's really neat about that and how it's oddly ties in is that there was a dance song, there was an EDM song that I had that I actually had used one of Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode's vocals on, and the loopholes to go through just to get the permission to use it. I mean, I was going to have to contact BMI in the UK to get the rights to use it. And it was so much of a hassle that I finally just went back and I recorded the vocals myself.
Yeah.
And going from that period of time to doing Black Celebration was, okay, it's a couple clicks of a button and okay, we have the rights for it.
Yeah.
It goes back to that whole technology thing and just the things you're able to do now that you were not able to do back then is just incredible.
Yeah, we've done a couple of covers, and I know how that goes. Making sure you've got all your permissions and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, like when y'all do covers, you definitely wanna do it in the style that is suiting to the band. And when we've done them, we usually slow them down, make them real. And we did a cover of Crimson and Clover, and and that is like the weirdest song in terms of time signatures. And he even, we wound up having to add some lyrics of our own to kind of make it work, because there's just not a whole lot of lyrics and everything. The whole song just swells the whole time. There's not really a whole lot going on. So yeah, I understand that. But well, look, man, what do y'all have coming up? I mean, I'm sure y'all have got some things coming up in the future. What are y'all looking at right now?
Yeah, I can say right off the bat on Halloween. I don't know when you're going to put this out, but on Halloween, we've got we are part of a Twin Peaks compilation for Darkness Calling, and it will be available exclusively on Bandcamp. And all the sales from the compilation go directly to support the Trevor Project. And our contribution to that is we are doing a cover of Chromatic Shadow, which was featured in Twin Peaks Season 3, The Return. So all the songs that are on this compilation are either inspired by the show Twin Peaks or are music from Twin Peaks, because Twin Peaks was one of the very few television series that spawned a very iconic soundtrack to it, and equally the composer he inspired some of the sounds that like we use on like Sacred Heart, for instance. So with our cover version of Shadow, we actually used some of our, you know, slide guitar and twangy guitar techniques that we used on Sacred Heart, and sort of took their version, because to me, you know, the Chromatics original is perfection, and I would never touch it unless we had the opportunity to do something. Like, I would never do this and just put it out on our Spotify,
Right.
but because it was like, you know, being a part of this compilation, and it was like, it was right there for the taking. It was like, well, we have to do this. And I'm really, really, really excited about it, because it's now, I mean, like, he said his wife is like, this is your guys' best song. And I'm like, well, I wish that we could take credit for that, because Chromatics wrote such an amazing song to begin with, but we definitely have put our spin on it for sure.
Yeah.
It's slower, it's twangier, it's definitely a different version, but we didn't want to stray too far from what made the original so unique and perfect. And then outside of that, our next thing we've got 2 songs we're putting out as a double, not a single, a double. It's very exciting, called Baptism and Hot Crucible. And those, because of the timing of Shadow coming out, we decided to push those back a little bit. So maybe those will be out towards the end of the year. And then we've got a few more. So we're kind of back in the swing of rolling them out again. But we definitely have more coming on the way. And then eventually, you know, we're always sort of toying with the idea of playing shows or doing a live broadcast of some kind, but we just haven't. It's still just the 2 of us, just like in the lab, coming up with ideas, and so we haven't put together an Occults band yet. But it's definitely something that we would like to do. Plus, we're getting close to the point where we'd have a full set's worth of material to play anyway. So,
Right.
I think it would be it's easier for us to play shows when we've got, you know, 40 minutes worth of material rather than like 3 songs to play. So
Yeah.
I think we're getting to a point where it's like we'd have a really good set, and then we'd definitely like to start maybe you know, seeing where that goes.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible that y'all might do a couple of small tours or little runs, just, you know, pick, you know, the West Coast or the East Coast or the Southeast, or?
I think it depends on the situation. We definitely, like we kind of hinted at before, like we're rode hard, and we're just kind of like the idea of going back at it and pounding the pavement and like promoting and selling tickets and all of that stuff just like isn't as fun as sitting around writing music.
Right.
So I think it just has to be a very specific set of circumstances, and I think that and that's kind of where we want to be. And I know to some people that might sound, you know, stuck up or egotistical or whatever, but it's just like it just is what it is in the climate of the music industry now, that it's like it's more work than it's worth, really. And I would rather just be sitting here writing great songs that people want to listen to than spend most of my time begging people on Facebook to come out to a show.
I do understand. Yeah.
I think that you know, starting this project, you know, we're not spring chickens anymore. You know, we've toured and traveled and gone through, you know, the hardships that any other bands that are on the road go to. And, you know, doing this project really kind of sets me in the mode of, you know, there was for a period of time that, you know, Johnny Marr from the Smiths had a side project called Electronic with one of the guys from New Order, and they never toured. They just put out music, and they did a handful of festivals and things like that, and they might go and travel and do press conferences here and there. But I kind of, you know, I think once you get to a certain point, it's like, does the benefits outweigh? You know, you have to really kind of look at, what are we going to be doing? You know, in our old band, I think we had our fair share of, you know, playing on stages that were no big as this desk that we're working on right now. And I think we're kind of, you know, again, not to sound egotistical, but I think we're beyond that point of really just wanting to do any of that. You know, and it's not to say that if the right thing came along, then 100% we'd be on board and we would scurry to get a band together.
Yeah.
But this is fun, what we're doing right now.
I think there's certain festivals for, you know, the post-punk, shoegaze, gloomgaze, as I like to. I think it's
dark wave.
Dark wave.
Yeah.
Procession magazine called us gloomgaze, and I'm like in love with that. I'm like, that's hell yeah, man.
It's
sign us for that. Dark wave, yeah, I think dark wave in general. I think there's a lot of there's really good festivals, like, you know, in LA. We've got Substance, which is actually going on right now. And then Cold Waves has become a big one that just happened in New York and LA and in Chicago. And so I think there are opportunities like this. The genre is really starting to take off in good ways. And I'd love for us to be a part of that. But I would be more akin to playing shows like that than necessarily like gigging and hitting the road. And
Yeah.
you know, but
I understand that. Well, I mean, you know, a lot, you know, selfishly people want you out there, but they don't see what all goes into all that. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, and yeah, we get messages all the time, you know, through Instagram asking us those things, and that, and also like vinyl, like when are your vinyls coming out? And like that's another impossible question. And it's like, man, the backlog on vinyl is like 13, 14 months. And
I know. Well,
like,
and not only that, but I mean, there's always like, you have to buy so many, you know.
yeah, that too. That has to make it absolutely worth it. And
yeah,
the physical demand is more of a novelty right now than a necessity. And
right.
And so we treat everything like we're going to do this double, and we're actually going to do a cassette single as the physical release for it. But that's just, we just know that it's like there are people out there with cassette decks, you know. It's more of like a novelty, like, hey, look at this, you know. So it's just, we just treat it like a merch item.
Yeah, well, yeah, we get a lot of people asking us about vinyl, but if we did, you know, our albums are 180 minutes, so you're talking four vinyl disc in there.
Oh yeah, Kiss Alive, baby.
And you know, and if we get, you know, if you have to order, like, you have a minimum of 500 vinyls. I mean, can you ever justify that price? It's tough. It's tough, but
yeah. And there's a lot of great bands that have gotten some label support, and they are finding ways to break through the Adeles and Taylor Swifts supply and demand, but and they're putting out really, really great. I just got an amazing like neon yellow vinyl, you know, that I'm just like blown away. Like, how do they get their hands on this?
Yeah, I just got 3 vinyls from Lycia, which I don't know if you know who they are, but they're an older kind of, what is it? Just, I don't know. It's like atmospheric goth style.
Yeah.
And so I've been checking those out, but I know, man, the whole merch thing and the touring thing, it's tough, but yeah, it would be awesome, you know. Say for instance, if Stabbing Westford, say we mentioned them earlier, if they're like, hey man, do y'all want to go do a 3-week run? I mean, that it would be all. I mean, I think that something like that would be awesome to jump on. Yeah, that's kind of what I hope we can do one day as well.
Figure our lives out.
Yeah.
Kids are going to babysitters for that one.
Yeah, it's just for us. It's just, you know, with the right circumstances, we're not killing ourselves
Yeah.
to do it. I mean, during like last year, we were kind of like, when people were still kind of stuck inside, we were talking about like we should put together like a live stream of some kind, but we opted just to keep writing. So
I mean, we did some videos.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did a couple of video. We did some video content, and we're definitely we're making it known that we are actual real people, that we do exist. So, but yeah, other than that, yeah, it's just a matter of hopefully the right circumstances occur and we can do it. But
yeah. Cool, man. Well, look, dude, once again, I'm so glad to be able to talk to y'all, kind of get a little insight into some of my favorite music lately. And it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Do y'all want to plug any of, y'all sites where people can find you? And
yeah, absolutely. You can find us on social media, mostly just under Occults Official, Instagram, Facebook, and Bandcamp. And then we've also got some really great merch available on Bandcamp, as well as our EP. You can actually get a compact disc of. Sorry, no vinyl. But you have the option. We'll autograph it for you and send it out to you. And then yeah, we've got new stuff coming very soon.
cool, man. Yeah, I'm gonna get on Bandcamp and get one of those. Actually, I need one of those autographed to me. Well, look, man. Once again, thank you so much, and we'll be in touch. I cannot wait to see what y'all have coming up next. Honestly.
Thank you so much.
Definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. Well, we'll keep in touch, and until then, I will catch you later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.